Let's try to get the meeting started on a timely basis here. We have a quorum of the commission. Want to welcome all of you here this evening. They're kind of a special meeting, and I appreciate the staff and public's attendance. One of the reasons we wanted to have this meeting when we did is statutorily we have a certain amount of time we have to publish certain regs that are going to be voted on tonight, and we would like to make sure that they are done so that they become effective and we can put them, if passed, into the proclamation or in the hunting and fishing, in this case the fishing guide. Want to remind you that we're streaming live, so for our people at home who are watching, if you would come up and use the microphone, it would enhance their ability to hear what you have to say. To start with, I'd like to introduce or have an introduction of the commissioners.
Randy Dahl, Leon.
Don Budd, Kansas City.
Robert Wilson, Pittsburgh.
And I'm Gerald Lauber from Topeka.
Frank Meyer from Harrington.
Tom Dill, Salina.
Good evening. I'm Deborah Bolton from Garden City.
Todd Workman, Assistant Secretary. Keith Sexton, Assistant Secretary in Pratt.
Robin Jennison, Topeka.
Linda Craighead, Assistant Secretary.
Chris Tymerson, Legal Counsel.
Okay, I'm not sure, there are no deletions to the agenda items in the briefing book. So at this point, I would like to, yes?
It's not an addition to the agenda, but there is an additional piece of paper that needs to be handed out based upon a comment from the Legislative Committee on the regs.
Okay.
It's also available on the back, but it's not in the briefing book.
All right, we'll get to this here in just a little bit. Everybody is, I assume, had a chance to read the minutes. Is there an approval?
I make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. At this point in time, I suspect a lot of you are here on some of the items that are on the agenda, but this is an opportunity to have general public comment on those items that are not on our agenda this evening. If anybody has anything they would like to discuss with the commission, this would be the time to do it. Yes, sir. Please come up and state your name and speak into the microphone.
I apologize, I don't have one for everyone, but try to be quick here. You guys can share. My name is Dennis Steinman. I lived in Kansas almost all my life. I'm in Chanute. Currently live in Lawrence. I'll be real quick. I wanted to introduce you to something that I'm doing and ask you to consider something in the future. I've been a bow hunter all my life, and a couple of years ago I shot a nice deer that was a trophy, and I looked for him for 2 days. Finally found him, and in the process of doing that, I decided I was going to try to solve that problem. And so I've been working for a couple of years on a product. I wanted to show it to you and just introduce it to you. And it is illegal in Kansas. It's an electronic transmitter that fits on the arrow, And when it hits, it slides back, opens up, comes off the arrow, sticks in the hide, turns it on, turns a transmitter on in this capsule. Then the receiver is a directional antenna that's used to find the capsule. I gave you a little presentation there. It does show you I think it's on page 3. It does show the reg that says that it is illegal. I did a survey of all the states, and I found that about 74%, I think it's 73 or 74% of the hunting permits that were issued in the United States last year were in legal areas. So we are one of the minority. But it's my understanding that there was kind of a broad brush regulations back when to take no electronics on the arrow. And then, as you know, some of these items like the lighted nocks and some other things have come along. So anyway, I started a company, a Kansas LLC, and as we started to design this product, I had a manufacturing company in Chanute most of my life, and I had a lot of employees there and kind of semi-retired, and I'm finding myself going back into this, and I hope to build a little company around it, do some other products, and go forward. So, but anyway, that's kind of beside the point. I'd just like to ask you to consider this, and I know it's probably, for next year, for the next deer hunting season, and I just wanted to introduce you to it. So, do you have any questions?
Yes, are there any other products other than yours that are in existence? Are you kind of the sole manufacturer of this product
There are some others out there,
that works similar to this?
similar, and not as well, but
And I understand that.
yeah.
Does that change the ballistics of your arrow?
It doesn't, and we do have a website, and we're in the process of putting the website together, and on that we did a video where we show shooting with and without it, and it virtually doesn't affect it. It weighs 35 grains, which is not very much, so.
What's this piece of rubber behind the broadhead? What's the
What
purpose
that,
of that?
well, the capsule slides up underneath it, so that's what holds it in place. So when it hits, the capsule slides out from underneath it. That way, then it can open and separate itself from the arrow.
Is that a typical, the arrow, is that typical of other archery arrows, the point
Yeah,
there? Okay.
yeah, I think so.
It'd work on a crossbow like that or a longbow.
Yeah, they will. Yeah.
Joe, why don't you make a run for the door and I'll see if that thing works.
So I'll be back, with more information or whatever, and I can be reached if you have any questions. So if that's it, I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Are there any other public comment? Yes, sir.
My name is Phil Taunton. I'm from Emporia. I represent KVOE and also the Kansas Wildlife Federation. I do want to commend Robin, Wildlife and Parks and Tourism, for helping us out with what we're doing with KCN. It's something that we got a nice letter from Governor Brownback. I'm fully aware of the funding, but we're using all we can in our initiatives to get the programs out. On the radio, we have a trivia contest, and Mike's aware of when I used to write for the Emporia Gazette, we asked for a youth outdoor experience contest, and you can't believe the number of stories that we're getting. What I really like about it is the number of schools that are participating in this. And what I really designed this for was to show schools what eco meets and envirothons were all about. So thank you, Robin. Let's keep going with this. I'm also here on behalf of a lot of NGOs that when I got this minutes a fellow by the name of Tim Donges, talked about increasing fines and penalties. I do wish we would take a serious look at that. We put a little poll on the radio. The radio called me early this afternoon after I got done with a show on WIBW, and it's now 260 yes, 40 no. So that is something, you know, we need to listen to what the people want. Yeah, it's just, you know, if things can be changed in Alabama, if things can be changed in Ohio, and I hear that they're changing in Michigan, we need to look at this. In a little publication, Last Child on the Prairie, you see the last page? I had that young man in a hunter's ed class. So, you know, I don't know if stiffer fines will defer that, stiffer penalties. I do know that we're looking at a lot of things that would need to be changed. First time I come to a meeting here, it was in the late 90s, they were talking about quail. How come quail has really declined? What can we do with that? And I think we was going to have a pretty fired up meeting. The first guy to come up and talked, he said, I would like to address the decline. I said, yes, they're going to talk about quail. He said, the decline of jackrabbits. So I know everybody, you know, we have a lot of things to look at, but we just need to work together and try to do what we can, you know, to try to stem the poaching and road hunting and people, you know, shooting off the road. A lot of people won't refuse to hunt next to the road because shells are firing up through there and everything else. So I do thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? Yes.
Name's Daryl Becker, and I'm from Sabetha. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a sore throat. I want to thank all of you for being here and giving us this opportunity to give the average person a voice. Here's a little over 20 of the forms that were on your website in regards to some of the changes coming up. There's mixed views in there from different people on different items, but every one of them, and if I had everyone that told me they were going to have them to me on time, if I had them all, there'd probably be double that. But there isn't anyone who is in favor of moving deer season the week or the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Wildlife and Parks has done a great job of managing this herd and keeping it the way it is with the seasons that we have. I don't believe we need to damage that for our future hunters by moving that a week ahead of time for possibly maybe 2 or 3 good years until after that, I think we'll see a decline. So, in summary, everybody that I've talked to, rifle, bow, muzzleloader, everybody agrees that moving the rifle season forward another week is a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have anything to say this evening that isn't on the agenda?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I just have a comment. A couple of weeks ago, I participated in a training to teach young people how to trap, and just went through all the different kinds of traps, and it was exciting to see that young people are interested in it. These were middle schoolers and some a little bit younger than that who will be coming of age, and it was one of the biologists from the Garden City area, and it was really a good class, and I encourage any of you, if you get a chance to take classes like that, to do that, to see what our young people are doing and to support our biologists when they're training. Thank you.
That's good. You know, fur is a renewable resource, and trapping tends to get a bad rap that I disagree with. I trap a little bit myself, primarily to make a social statement, as well as it's a good hobby. It's interesting, and it is frequently good for the habitat, good for everything in general. So anything that we can do to enhance trapping, I would support. Does anybody else have any comments before we get rolling here? All right. Do we have a department report? Want to give a impromptu department report?
I think it's just on the agenda as an overall header for the public hearing. I think we're ready to start the public hearing, Mr. Chairman.
I would hang on every word, Counselor. Okay, let's start with the public hearing then. Oh, okay, there we go.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm Linda Craighead. I'm here to approach the commission with respect to 115-2-2. We are requesting as an agency that you consider repealing the second vehicle permit for annual park permit. Purposes for the state parks in an effort to streamline our programs and to enhance our revenues. We feel that this is in the best benefit of the agency as a whole. I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Motion to approve.
Do we have any comments? Yes. Yes, please.
Yeah, my name's Guy Ellis, and my wife and I are outdoors people. We're from Topeka here, and we use the lakes and parks a lot. And we do spend several $100s a year, we you folks. And we're retired, and I guess any out-of-pocket more than we're presently paying, we don't like, because we're on fixed income, and it's just more money out of our pocket, and we do have, like I say, several vehicles, and we use them all. I just would not like to see an increase.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments on that? And nobody likes to have an increase. We've done a lot of thoughts on the second vehicle permit, and there are some real advantages in doing it the way we've done it here. Any other comments?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, Shirley and I have, we always take advantage of the early buy, and then second vehicle, third vehicle, we have 3 vehicles, and then the old fogey deal. And quite frankly, for the several years, I felt a little bit guilty we're getting by so cheap, And I think what we're proposing here is a good thing, something we can live with, and get us a little more money for the parks. So I totally support it.
Yes, please, come up.
Yes, my name's Ted Decker, and I worked up at Perry for a while in the park mowing, and until I got a better job, but it was fun mowing and stuff up there and meeting the campers and everything. But when I got done mowing and when I went back up to where my vehicle was parked, if I wanted to go back down in the park, I had to buy a permit. I mean, I'm in the park all day, I think if I worked there, I ought to be able to go back down there and go fishing for a little bit or something just by myself. But that was the only thing I was going to say. But if you work there, you ought to have a little bit of something there to go back down and fish or talk to a camper or something.
Michael.
Yeah, I've got a question. Linda, have you projected how much increase this could bring for funding?
If everybody that bought a second permit last year renewed with that second permit, we would be increasing our permit sales by approximately $8,000.
$8,000.
Right.
And has the existing system had problems?
With respect to, we had 4,000 permits sold on a second vehicle permit last year. So we would have an increase, if it increased that by $5, because that's the $10, excuse me, $40,000. Because there's a $10 difference between the $22.20 at regular price and $12.20 at second price.
So it would be a possible increase of about $40,000.
Potentially, so if everything stayed flat, yes.
Has the current system of the second vehicle had some problems with legalities and?
I think what it's really had problems with, Michael, I appreciate that question, is customer service. The things that is required with that second permit is that proof of registration be shown, and it has become really kind of a frustration to some people. They have to go out, go back to their house, pick up what they need, and some people come very prepared because they are repeat customers. But one of the things that we're really trying hard to work on is to focus on the individual's concerns and make it easier for our customers to purchase.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm torn about this because at one hand, I'd like to see the department generate more funds. On the other hand, there are people that want to use the parks that do have fixed incomes or are low income, and I'm just not sure how it works out. So one of the earlier proposals was to have a reduced fee for the second vehicle, right? And we're saying no to that. That's what we're doing right now, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I remember when I was in high school and living in Woodson County, I used to terrorize Paul States, who ran the park there, because I'd take a stack of registrations that all had my dad's name on them and try to see if back then I think it was $5 and $1. And, you just have all kinds of issues that people have called me about. I have an LLC and my car's in the LLC. How come I can't get a permit? How come I can't get a second permit? It is, in some cases, it's a good benefit, and in other cases, there's just all kinds of issues. And if you don't get it bought quickly, the clerk behind the counter is in the doghouse with the consumer. And there is a fair amount of abuse. So I tend to lean to the department, although I'm sensitive to people on fixed incomes. I just can see how these are issues to where, and I'm not, yes, the extra money is nice, but it is complicated because every state park and everybody's got a situation as to why my two titles with different names ought to be approved. You also have the problem now with Kansas not having so many e-titles. You don't have an actual title, so you have to work off a registration, which is doable, but it is all different. It's just not as easy as it used to be. Are there any more discussion, any more comments? And I appreciate all the comments from the public as well. I think Don did make a motion, and before we got a second, I started getting into some discussion, so I am going to need a second, and we can still have more discussion.
I'll second.
Now, is there any more discussion? Does staff have any more comments about this?
Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering what special events might be excluded for the permit on item C. Annual permits, motor vehicles shall not be valid during designated special events. Would this be like the past contest or something?
No, Mr. Chairman, it's like the Country Stampede where there's an exclusive lock on the park for the weekend.
Okay. So it's not a common.
No.
All right.
Any other thoughts or comments? Well, there are no amendments. This is going to be a pass-fail, as appears to me. So, let's call the roll.
All right, I'm going to call the roll since Sheila's gone.
Okay?
Commissioner Bolton,
Yes.
Commissioner Budd,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Passed 7-0. It'll be effect January 1.
All right, Doug.
Mr. Chairman, Commission. Tonight we bringing to you a series of regulation changes that are designed to deal with the spread of invasive species. We handed out something that wasn't in the briefing book that I asked Jason Geckler, and Jason's here. If we have questions, we can have him answer them as a guide, because this is going to be rather complicated. Up till now, we've been talking about two options, actually three: do nothing, continue on as is. Option number one would be to take use bait where you take it, and option two would allow for an exception for 4 species of more easily identified bait fish to be used and taken from one place to the other. And so the guide that we gave you basically lists the options, the pros and cons of those options, and what regulations, if you desire option one, what regulations you should vote in favor of, or if you prefer option two, the regulations that you would want to vote in favor of in order to execute option two. With that, if you don't have any questions, I think we'll go ahead and start with 17.3. Excuse me.
115.7.3.
7.3, yes.
Well, I've got a couple. The suggested amendment from the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, the only difference from that is the shall be used on that flowing stream.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. It's a technical amendment. If you're going to adopt the regulation as presented, then it's my suggestion, based upon comments from the Joint Committee, that we also have to make that amendment, the suggested amendment.
All right. Now, before we start entertaining any motions or doing anything on this, I suspect there is going to be some thought and some public comment. I'll first preface by saying doing nothing is not a good option. We can't do that. So I think we're looking at basically the wild caught bait being used in the impoundment where it's at, or the suggested amendment that's in the briefing book that would basically allow the transportation of 4 species of fish. To start with, I'd like to see what public comment there may be. I know I've had some constituents have contacted me, and I'd like to have anybody who would like to address this issue, please come up and do so.
Okay, again, my name is Ted Decker. I live in Perry, Kansas. And I just got a few things here. I'm a flathead fisherman. And either one of these options, there's some questions I'd like to ask about. If we'll just say the Missouri River, I catch bait out of a pond up by Perry and put it in a live well and go over to Missouri and fish in the Missouri River, or a tribute that goes into the Missouri River. You know, is that and I didn't understand what a natural barrier is. What's a natural barrier? Is that a creek bank or a beaver dam or?
Oh, it's a federal dam, something
Oh, a
that
dam.
fish can't get over, get over.
Okay, so it's not the riverbank, or yeah. And then like the Missouri River, I don't know what the Missouri laws are on their bait fish on their side of the river over there. But what if I buy bait in southeast Kansas and bring it up to northeast Kansas and fish? Like Hilgramites, they're around here, but they're not like down in southeast Kansas. And years ago, I went into a bait shop here in Topeka, and I bought Asian carp. They had them for sale, and I used them for bait. Back then, nobody thought anything about them, but, now all of a sudden, the cat fisherman, it seems like, is taking taking the blunt of this thing, you know, and like I can go into pet stores now and buy scorpions and ferrets and all this, and I mean, if I turn them loose, I mean, I think it needs to be brought up at the bait shops, what they're selling and where they're getting them. And, you know, there's one fish, there's one predator that will help these Asian carp and all the trouble we're having with all these species is getting introduced into these streams. And, you know, we've strapped a saddle on this one predator that wants to help us, and that's the flathead. I mean, you know, you can hand fish them, you can shoot them with a bow. I mean, we want to get rid of that one predator that'll help us, you know, help us get rid of these unwanted things. And, you know, if they had this for crappie and bass, a meeting similar to this for crappie or bass, man, there'd be a war in the state of Kansas. But the flathead fishermen, I'm just getting knocked clear out, you know. I'm just going to almost have to quit fishing. But that was some of my concerns, like fishing the Missouri River and taking bait from one part of the state and bringing it back up here and using it, or taking bait from here over there and using it. But if I had my druthers, option 2, I could live with it probably. Option 2.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out, we're talking about wild-caught bait, not purchased bait.
Yeah.
In this regulation. So, you know, if you read it, if taken on a flowing stream or river, the wild-caught bait fish shall not be transported. So, we're not talking about you go to the bait shop and buy it.
But I can still buy them from, I can still catch my own bait in a farm pond.
And use it in that farm pond.
You can't take it to the Kansas River and use it?
No.
On either option?
Option 2 would allow, but basically what we're trying to do is, in my opinion, the Asian carp have physical similarities to gizzard shad. And there have been certain occasions to where people have had your basic freeze-dried little species of the gizzard shad, the silver carp, and the big head carp, and you kind of shuffle them around, and people say, oh, I can tell them right away. Well, there is an incredible level of misidentification by experienced anglers because these fish do look similar. Now, if you studied a book and you looked at it and then take a test in 5 minutes, you can probably do okay. But in the wild, there's a lot of different things that affect some coloration. Green sunfish, for example, or bluegill or little bullheads, they don't look like shad. They're different. They're a different color. They're a different shape. And so there is not much likelihood in misidentification. There's probably 50 different names that a green sunfish goes by depending upon what part of the state you're in, and so there's confusion as to the name, but generally no confusion between those and wild-caught bait, or Asian carp. The problem, and I tend to like the exemption personally, and I've stated that before, but to support the other side, the problem is people have difficulty in, oh, I didn't realize I had some shad in my bucket along with that, or I didn't realize I had this. And it's easier to police if people don't move bait from one impoundment to another. And for people who use a throw net and catch a shad in the lake where they're at, that's probably not that big a problem. For people who have seen them in another area, there are certain impoundments where you can't get the shad, then that creates an impediment. And you may or may not be able to buy shad at a price that is easy for the common man to use. Invasive species, aquatic nuisance species, are a potential problem, and if you, in certain parts of the state, you don't think about it, but go down to some of the weirs down in Wyandotte County and see the incredible vast numbers of silver carp, and then go to some of those states that have silver carp infestation. And it's kind of cute to see the videos of guys getting hit in the head with a fish, but if it's your head, it's not so cute. And we have to stop, in my opinion, that type of thing. So I wish we didn't have to do anything. I wish we didn't have to drain live wells. I wish we didn't have to worry about moving water and a lot of the things like that. But we do have the problem with invasive species, and I think we're going to have to respond, and not doing anything is going to get us in trouble, my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of biologists too. Now, I've talked quite a bit. Does somebody else on the commission have a thought on this?
I'm a little confused, I guess, because is option 115.7.3 and the amendment option 2?
115.7-3 is option 1 as proposed. Option 2 is the amendment, which would allow the 4 species to be.
The suggested amendment, in addition, is amendment number 3, that is just a housekeeping.
It's a technical amendment.
And it would make no practical difference.
Correct.
Didn't we have a lot of input from the guys out in Cheney, maybe, on this?
I think it was primarily fishermen from Wilson Reservoir. Wilson is a reservoir that it's difficult to cast net and catch gizzard shad for bait in the spring of the year. Very few gizzard shad make it through their first winter there. There's so many predators, and so they were concerned about the impact on having to catch where you take it. And they are also concerned about gizzard shad. Now, the way that we passed the commercial bait regulations, gizzard shad were not on the list of species that could be sold for bait. So we have really excluded the use of gizzard shad being purchased by the bait vendors. So right now, under the way it sits right now, if we pass this option, if they can catch gizzard shad, they can use it on the waters where they catch it, but they can't haul it somewhere else, and they can't buy them because they're not going to be legal for sale.
Are they legal for sale now?
Not now. No, well, they won't become January 1.
Is there anybody from Wilson or that part of the country that's here tonight?
Now, if the bait's frozen in a jar, you can buy shad in a jar.
Yes,
Walmart.
right. They won't be able to have them. They won't be able to sell them live, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
All this has to do with live bait.
Live bait fish.
Yeah, at some of the other meetings, Don, there was some serious opposition from those people. And I fully understand, and I've tried to think informally of ways to allow them to be able to have their shad, or try to create some sort of a good substitute that's an effective bait. You talk to a shad fisher or a fisherman like that, and they're going to say that I can't get the same results from dead shad on ice, and it just isn't going to be the same. And I understand that, and I feel for them. I also know there's a tremendous amount. I think the shad creates more risk of inadvertent introduction because they look similar. I think inadvertent introduction by allowing green sunfish is not as great a concern. So I suppose it's bad if you fish out there, but I don't know how to get around that. I just don't know what to do.
What are you going to do?
Well, what I'm going to do is try to get enough votes to get this passed and get both amendments approved. That's what I'm going to try to do.
Mr. Chair, I have a comment. Okay, well, the calls that I've been getting are really supporting the option 1. I think option 2 increases policing, because if you're going to transport those 4 fish, we have to make sure that they're properly identified. I don't know if that increases work for law enforcement. Option 1 shows that we're serious about decreasing aquatic nuisance species. And I've mostly heard from my constituents that are voting for option 1, for the record.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you've been talking a lot about gizzard shad. Nothing that I said before us would allow the transporting of gizzard shad from one water to the other. So why have we been talking about it?
Well, gizzard shad is why I think the gizzard shad is primarily why we're having the first
That it wouldn't be allowed by Amendment 1 either.
It's not going to be allowed anywhere.
Okay, so why are we talking about it?
The reason I'm talking about it is just because that's the reason we're doing this to start with, and I think gizzard shad are on the way out as far as being transported.
So we don't need to talk about it anymore.
Well, if we pass the first one, if we pass the regulation, gizzard shad will not be able to be moved.
Would there be any enforcement problem if either option were passed?
I would say that I could defer to Kevin Jones, law enforcement director, if you want to get his opinion. I think you'd rather hear from him, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Maybe we can get this to work this way. Anytime that you start in to regulate any kind of movement of wildlife, there becomes law enforcement issues attached to that. You know, there's the issues of search and seizure and stop and things like that. One of the things that we would have to look at with these two options, of course, if there were to be no movement of wild fish from a location, if they were used exclusively on that water, we would still have a responsibility to check to see if they're actually staying on that water or if people are actually moving them off. If you allow species to be moved around the state, here again, it's a matter that we would be required to check and ensure that the proper species would be moved. With that, even with the fact that the sunfish and bullheads that are listed are readily identifiable as opposed to confusing gizzard shad or certain species of minnows and things like that, it still will take an officer's time to look at that critically to see if there are, in fact, an entire load of legal fish or the like that's being moved. So yes, it would be an issue that law enforcement will have to deal with, but it is one we're prepared to handle as appropriate as whatever the regulations come out to be. So I don't know if that answers your question or not. Yes, there's going to be impacts on law enforcement because it's a new set of regulations, a new set of stipulations that we are going to have to ensure that people abide by. So yes, that's another item we're going to have to deal with.
Well, I'm going to tell you what I heard, and you tell me if I heard something other than what you said in that answer. Either option 1 or option 2 is enforcement's going to be different than what it is right now.
That would be true.
So either option is going to be different, so one's not going to create more of a burden than the other to law enforcement.
Not necessarily. I mean, there's going to have to be checks and balances on both sides of this. And it's just that if you allow certain species to be moved, like say now we're looking at fish that could be in possession, what fish are in possession? That's the question we'd have to answer at the time.
But those are readily identifiable fish.
Compared to all the other species of minnows and everything else that could be out there, yes, they are fairly distinct species of fish to deal with.
Do you have an opinion on this?
I just soon stand neutral and let the commission make their decision.
Mr. Chairman, it seems like the possible amendment that we have, which is option 2, it seems like that is almost the same as doing nothing, because I mean, how many, out of every 100 fishermen that are in process, how many are we going to police? 1 out of 100 or 5 out of 100? Surely it's not going to be very much. I'm asking a question here.
Well, I guess if I'm understanding what your question is, if you look at the number of fishermen that we check in proportion to the number of fishermen that are out there, we probably don't come close to checking the majority. I know we don't do the majority. It's a small sample set of the entire fishing population that is out there.
5%, 10%? I'm not going to hold you to a number.
Yeah, you're probably getting closer down into the 5% area and lower when you look at the total number of fishermen that could be out.
Okay.
And then as you expand that out, you can be talking about a small reservoir and say, I've checked everybody here on the reservoir, but we're not there 24/7. And when you look at the entire proportion of people that come and go, we check a small portion of those.
Well, it seems like option 2 here is almost the same as not doing anything. So we have a problem in front of us, and it looks like the second option really doesn't address the problem in my mind. I'm just trying to look at it from a logical standpoint. I don't deal with these types of species. I don't do this, so I'm just trying to be as fair as I possibly can. And to me, the only way you can really tackle the problem and the issue is to go with the original amendment, which is no wild-caught bait can be moved. I'll stop right there. That's my thoughts on it.
You said amendment, you meant the original.
I'm sorry, the original. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Yes.
I guess my feeling has been that our biggest risk in front of us is to keep the Asian carp from being spread throughout the state. And I think that the amendment will have, it doesn't eliminate that goal. It doesn't eliminate us moving towards that goal because the species are very distinct. As far as checking everybody, we have to assume that there will be a lot of voluntary compliance. Most of the rules are voluntary compliance, and the concern of a violation at being at 1 or 2% that may get checked, that will provide some incentive. You're still going to have to check people as to whether or not they bought the bait at a bait shop, or what kind of bait do you have, would you have goldfish. I think that it'll all require some additional effort, but I think if your goal is to stop the movement of Asian carp, I think either that the proposed reg and the amendment do that. If you want to start talking about the movement of more water and that may have other items included, then I think that there is a disadvantage, an ancillary disadvantage there. Both sides of this argument have merit, and I think that we're going to have to eventually cast a vote, and that's going to be whatever it turns out to be. Any more discussion? Yes, sir.
Well, the law enforcement over here, he was talking about, well, his percentage is way down there, 5%. Well, that's true on any checking hunting license, checking fishing license, checking the limits. He can't check everybody every time on everything. And it's not going to be bait. I mean, like dyed diesel. How many people are using it, you know? I mean, they're not being checked on everything. Nothing's going to change. And I don't use shad. I go to farm ponds and get all my perch out of farm ponds and set lines in the Missouri and the Kansas River. And I know what I'm using. There's no shad in these ponds. I mean, I don't see where the regular flathead and catfish fisherman is hurting anything. I mean, it's the channel cat fishermen, to me. I fish for channel cat a little bit, but they're more into the shad part of it, where flatheads aren't, you know.
I think that, as Frank commented, I think either way we vote tonight, there will be no movement of shad when we're done.
Well, they're not on the list. So we're not talking about shad. Well, Mr. Chairman, when I came on as commission 7 years ago, we never talked about invasive species. We never talked about zebra mussels. it wasn't a problem. In 7 years, our state has been overrun by it. I think we need to let the people of Kansas know that this is a serious problem. And to prevent it from spreading even further, or to slow down the spread even, we've got to say, if you catch it in this pond, put it back. If you don't, you're going to be part of the problem. And I think the people of Kansas understand that. But if we start saying, well, you can move this one and you can move some of these, and pretty soon they're taking them and they're dumping water that may have zebra mussels in it without their knowledge, a microscopic egg. So let's get serious about this and tell the people of Kansas, we want to protect our waterways, we want to protect our water, we want to protect your fishing areas so that our children or grandchildren have a place to go fishing. So let's, if you catch it in a body of water, put it back and don't take it anywhere else.
Who on the commission here fishes with live bait? What do you two guys think?
Well, there's 3 or 4 schools of thought on that. One of them is you're going to be able to buy these baits from a commercial bait dealer. Those black perch that are like 4 inches long are going to cost you like $4 a piece. You're going to have $30 in a dozen black perch that you can go to a farm pond and catch for $1.50 on a dozen worms. That's one thing. They say there's no economic impact, but there is. I mean, and it's going to be that way on all of these things. I mean, you won't be buying shad. The only reason you can't buy shad is they can't keep them alive. Nobody can keep those shad alive. It's just this species. I've caught them with a throw net and put them in 5-gallon buckets to use for bait. And if he jumps out of the bucket, lands on the deck of the boat, he flips 3 or 4 times and he's dead. I mean, they're that fragile. So nobody's going to be selling a shad. That's why the commercial people can't sell them. But they're still going to be selling black perch, green sunfish, all this other stuff. If you buy from the bait dealer, you're all right. You'll have a receipt from him. When Kevin checks you, you say, here it is. I bought a dozen of these fish down the street 30 minutes ago for $30, and this is what I'm using. That's part of it.
Well, if you do that, I want to buy a bait license and sell them to myself.
Well, I use green sunfish for limb lines in the creek, and a lot of times I'll go ahead and catch them in a riffle by the creek anyway. But I use them, and I've always used green sunfish as my preferred bait for limb lines. One of the most vocal proponents I've talked to for the regulation without the amendment was a bait dealer. And there was clearly an advantage for the bait dealer to not have any individual competitors. I said, why don't you come to the meeting and kind of speak up? Oh, they'll make everybody they'll be mad and they won't buy bait from me. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. But this is serious, and Frank's right. I mean, we have to do something, and we may, even if the amendment passed, we may find a report from law enforcement that we're seeing violations, and we think that it's not working, and in which case we'll have to go the next step. And there's people that would say that why take that chance and have to go back and revisit it. I suspect if we were to suddenly wake up Jason in the middle of the night and say, what do you think? He'd say, I don't like option 2. But he's prevented, I think, from giving too much of an opinion. Is that sort of how that might work, Jason? Perhaps. Yeah, perhaps.
Do both Amendment 1 and Amendment 2 protect the waterways from the Asian carp, from the zebra? Well, it really doesn't address the zebra mussel issue, but it protects from the Asian carp.
I think option 2, the weakness there would be that zebra mussel veligers could be moved if somebody was taking bait from one location, moving it to another. I think we get some protection from Asian carp by either option. There'll be some protection.
I'm going to defer to the 2 smart fishermen on the board.
Michael?
I
I have a question for Kevin. Kevin, if your guys are out checking somebody who's driving down the road with a John boat and a wet seine, and he's got a bucket full of 5-inch green sunfish, and he tells your guy he's going to take them home and eat them, what can your guys do?
Okay. I think I've got your scenario in mind. If the claim is being made that the fish are being, were caught and were being taken home for food, there's really nothing that you can do at that time. You're going to have to look at how the rest of the regulations parse out about movement and one thing or another of live fish from designated ANS waters, things like that that could potentially come into a play. But as long as we had no probable cause to believe that the fish were illegally caught or things like that, I mean, you mentioned a wet seine, that could be compounded if he didn't have any other type of fishing equipment or not that would potentially give you officer probable cause to, do the further investigation, maybe issue a citation or something like that. It's one of these things that anytime you come up with a scenario, what are the facts as opposed to how they may change. But in one point of theory, there really wouldn't be anything that would prohibit a person from moving green sunfish to take them home to eat and coming down the road with them.
Okay, and if you go with the one that requires bait only be used in the water where it's taken from, if they catch it in that stream, they cannot take it home with them, keep it in a tank, and then bring it back. Is that correct? Or they can do that?
115-7-10, no person may possess any live fish upon departure from any designated aquatic nuisance body of water. So,
And what Commissioner Meyer is referring to is a potential regulations that's coming up later on. Now, I need to get back. Your question was, could you restate that?
Basically that if I go down and catch green sunfish out of the Vermilion River, and you pass someone that says that I can't use them anywhere else, I can't take them home, keep them, and take them back to that river.
That would be true because the way
That's fine. I just want to make sure I understand
the way the new regulation is being constructed is you cannot leave the water with live fish.
Okay, thank you.
And I think natural barrier is probably the bank too. I mean, we said earlier it was the dam, but I think you can't take them over the bank and do something else with them. Are there any more comments from the public? I think everybody sees the issue. Any more comments, Ted?
Has there ever been a survey done? I know El Dorado Lake is full of zebra mussels, and some of these streams have got a lot of Asian carp in them and stuff. Has there ever been any survey work done on it? Any surveys of, like, how many farm ponds, and the percentage of the farm ponds have Asian carp?
Kind of. We have a pretty good idea where Asian carp have been found, discovered, and we pretty much know where they're at, and they're in some areas that anything seined, and because you don't necessarily catch Asian carp on a little bobber and a worm, but I suspect that if you were to go down below Clinton Reservoir and run a seine, you'd get a whole bunch of little silver fish, and they would be a mixture of big head silver carp and probably gizzard shad, and they'd all kind of look similar, and they'd look like wonderful bait. If you were to go down below the Bowersock Dam at Lawrence or in any of the tributaries between the Missouri River and in the Missouri River, you run a real good chance of picking up a lot of these invasive species, and it doesn't take very many of them to pop over the dam and to where you have your entire fishery and the tributaries upstream.
What's the percentage in a pond?
Well, I don't think we have a percentage in a pond, and I don't know if we know. We've only got a few ponds where they've been discovered because there's very little reintroduction of fish in a pond, and if there are some, I don't know exactly. They're probably of they're a smaller risk in a pond, I guess, than they would be in the rivers, but there have been studies done, and we can show maps of where they're at and where we found them, and it's pretty obvious where they're at and where the risks are the greatest, in my opinion.
Are all these ANS lakes posted already?
Generally, we try to post them, and we have no lakes to where any Asian carp are in them. Our ANS lakes are those that have zebra mussels, and it's an ever-growing group of impoundments that once you get them in one, you eventually get them in everything downstream. And several years ago, we had a little dot in this lake and a little dot in that lake, and now we've got half the rivers in the eastern part of the state that are zebra mussels there. And we may only be able to slow down the movement of zebra mussels, but we should try.
I have a question for Doug on similar to that issue on the transport, obviously of water, but since they're so small microscopically, can they be actually cling to or attached to some of the fish that we're talking about, like the bluegill, the green sunfish?
We're not aware of that happening. In their larval stage, though, they can be suspended in the water column. So if you're moving water from one location to the other, then you could certainly move larval zebra mussels, and that's one of the known vectors: water left in a boat or water moved in a bucket from point A to point B. There's been some studies that show that they cling to what they swim around, and they really, when they settle out, then they have these tendrils that attach to hard substrate. So I guess there's a potential, for them to do it that way, but more likely they would be suspended in the water column as veligers. If somebody was to pick up a rock that had adult zebra mussels on it and move it with water somewhere else, and adults could also be a potential risk, moving adults from one place to the other. I think the big concern, Jason may want to weigh in on this, would be the movement of the veligers, the larval stage.
And one of the subsequent rules or regulations that we're going to be looking at is going to be prohibiting the movement of fish from an ANS body of water. So if the next regulation gets passed, the only risk in theory is that there will be water transported from an area that would have ANS veligers that we're unaware of now. And I mean, someplace the water had to be moved the first time that had them in it. But as we're discovering zebra mussels, the risk of having the unidentified water, eventually the whole state is probably going to be ANS anyway, and you're not going to be able to move anything now, except if you bring it out of farm ponds.
I can say that we've been very successful overall in that we're up to, 14 impoundments now with zebra mussels. And we've got over 250 public lakes in the state. So the vast majority of the public lakes, of all the public lakes of community state fishing lakes, reservoirs, the vast majority of them are still free of zebra mussels. The waters that seem to be the most susceptible are waters of the larger federal reservoirs. They get more visits, more likely to have boating traffic coming and going. And so a lot of the waters that we have that are positive for zebra mussels are in fact the large, heavily used federal reservoirs.
And if we pass 115.710, some of the concerns that we're discussing right now about zebra mussels and it being moved will be eliminated to some extent too. We'll have to do a lot of posting. But if it's an ANS discovered water, you're not going to be able to move any kind of fish alive from it.
And all the waters that have an invasive species in them are currently posted now. We post them. What we did, we developed the reference list, which is the map that's on the attachment that we gave to you, and we have the list of the waters that we know that contain zebra mussels, Asian carp, or white perch, and that's in the reference document. But we continue to post even other places, like if there's an invasive species such as Chinese mystery snails, we put up a sign notifying the public that there's others, but those we have not deemed to be as onerous as Asian carp, zebra mussels, and white perch. So we did not include them on our designated list of ANS waters that would prevent the movement of fish or water or the draining of boats. So with that, I think we tried to not overdo it. We tried to look at the serious threat, and we feel that the serious threat are zebra mussels, the Asian carp, which includes grass carp as well. We've seen grass carp in the river system that's naturally producing as well, and then white perch.
And if we were to incorporate the next potential reg with this one and pass them both, we would have addressed the movement of water on as far as the zebra mussels.
Basically, yes. We really can't regulate the use of water, but we can regulate how people operate their gear.
I understand that, and I understand. Is there any more discussion, or are we ready to start voting?
This one is, it's designated as not an ANS lake. You can transport fish from there? It's not an ANS?
Well, that is the case, although there is a likelihood that we're probably going to be dealing in the very near future. I don't know if it's in tonight's meeting or not, but we're probably going to be dealing with the fact that you're not going to be able to move many fish at all alive.
It depends on which option they go with tonight. I mean, one option is you won't be able to move. You have to drain your boat, whether you're on infested water, which is on that list, or any other water. And then if we have some regulation that includes the movement of fish from ANS infested waters, and that would only be on the waters that are on the reference document that we've already established, and will be updated every year as we have new infestations.
Would it have been easier to list the waters that weren't?
No, it would not have been. We're not to that point yet.
No.
Most of the smaller impoundments and quite a number of the reservoirs still don't have any of those three groups: the Asian carp, white perch, and zebra mussel.
This just looks like a pretty extensive list here.
It's pretty extensive, but if you look, there's a map too on that handout that I gave you that has a graphical depiction of the infested waters, and you can get a better feel for the fact that even where we're at right now, still the majority of the waters of the state are not infested.
Mr. Chairman, to move things along, I move the adoption of 115-7-3.
Can I have a second on that?
I second it.
Okay, now parliamentarian.
Now that there's been a motion and a second to consider adopting the regulation, the department is suggesting we have a motion and a second on the technical amendment right now.
That is what was handed out, and that strictly states that the wild-caught bait fish shall be used on that flowing stream and water and not transported.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, I move the adoption of KAR 115-7-3 suggested amendment.
And can I have a second on that?
I'd second that.
All right. Now it's time to see if we can't get a motion on the next amendment, which...
Well, we can do it one of two ways. We can go ahead and amend now and then deal with the second amendment. So what I'm suggesting is you deal with this technical amendment first, and then if there's another amendment.
All right. So then we'll have a roll call on the technical amendment.
Correct.
Would you read the roll call?
Commissioner Bolton?
Yes.
Commissioner Budd?
What am I voting on?
The
This one
technical
right here.
amendment.
This piece of paper right
Yes.
here.
Right here.
Aye.
That was yes?
Yes.
Commissioner Dill?
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl?
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson?
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber?
Yes.
The technical amendment passed 7-0. Now, Mr. Chairman.
Now, the chairman would be interested in a motion to include the possible amendment, and this is the green sunfish exemption, while it includes green sunfish, bluegill, and both bullheads. And so I would like a motion that we include that amendment.
I make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second. And I have a second. Is there any additional discussion? It's gonna be a little dicier, isn't it?
Probably will.
Probably will be.
Democracy.
That's democracy in action. I've preached enough. Could you call the roll?
Commissioner Bolton,
No.
Commissioner Budd,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
No.
Commissioner Dahl,
No.
Commissioner Meyer,
No.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Motion failed. 3 in favor, 4 against. Now it's back on the
Now, okay.
regulation as amended.
Let's call the roll call on the original regulation
As amended with the technical amendment.
as amended with the technical amendment and without the green
Without the
sunfish amendment.
Commissioner Bolton,
Yes.
Commissioner Budd,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Passed 7-0.
Thank you, sir. All right, let's move on to the next one. KAR 11576, fishing bait.
Okay. This proposed regulation just merely updates the regulation in conjunction with the regulation package designed to prevent the spread of invasive species. Just a little cleanup language. If you see in the briefing book, you can see the underscored and the stricken text on 6B. Excuse me, on B.
Is there any discussion on this? Anyone supporting non-toxic and toxic material? Could I have a motion?
I would move we approve 115-7-6 as presented.
Second.
Let's hear a roll call.
Commissioner Bolton,
Yes.
Commissioner Budd,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Passed 7-0.
All right, 115-710.
This regulation will establish provisions related to fishing. The proposed amendments would prohibit the transporting live fish from designated waters containing aquatic nuisance species. And I would make sure you understand that this would be the 3 onerous groups: the Asian carp, which is grass carp, silver carp, and bighead carp. Then in addition to that, we have white perch and the zebra mussels. Not the other. There's other invasive species that we post that we don't feel that they would be a part of this regulation at this time.
In other words, you don't list the species that are included. You just designate them A&S waters.
The designated waters list is only waters that are infested with those
Certain types. Okay,
right.
got it. Any discussion on this?
No, excuse me, I misspoke. It's not, grass carp is not on that list. Excuse me.
So this is saying that you can't take those baits, those kind of baits out of an A&S place?
Well, it's saying you can't take any fish out of an A&S
Okay.
place. Crappie, anything that's alive. Is that correct, Doug?
Right.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I move adoption, 115-7-10.
Can I have a second?
I second it.
Now, is there any more discussion on this? Any discussion from the public? Let's have a vote.
Commissioner Bolton,
Yes.
Commissioner Budd,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Passed 7-0.
Okay, 115-8-6.
This proposed regulation will clarify that bait fish taken on department land and waters must be used where taken.
Mr. Chair, I move to adopt 115-8-6.
Second the motion.
Doug, this is actually rendered moot by the the first reg we passed?
Right.
Yeah, it's just a cleanup.
Yep.
Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Bolton,
Yes.
Commissioner Bud,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
Okay, 115.812.
115.812 is a proposed regulation that would prohibit the stocking or releasing of wildlife on navigable, publicly owned waters and federal reservoirs. And that's adding that to the current language that refers to department lands and waters. That would be the three navigable rivers, the Arkansas, the Missouri, and the Kansas rivers.
It's essentially dump your bait.
Right.
Any discussion on this?
That's like, even the bait, that you give the bait shop, don't dump it in there.
Yeah, that's basically it. And if you, when you're done with the bait, dispose of it, don't dump it in the water.
What about the ones that's already on your limb line that you bought at the bait shop?
That got away?
They got away. What am I gonna do about it?
No.
Chase it down.
I won't be able to sleep if I do that.
I understand.
Transmitter, right, get us.
If we see a bluegill in the river, we're gonna know where to look. All right. Can I have a motion? Oh, we have a motion. We have a second?
No, we don't have. Did
I second that.
Miss the motion?
Do we have a motion?
I don't think so. I didn't have one.
Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion?
We do need a motion.
I want to, we approve 115-8-12.
I second it.
Let's have, any more discussion? Let's have
One
a,
more thing. I just wanna ask you, can I still fish with crawdads?
I think crawdads have been exempted from that.
I think that's correct. Crayfish would still, you want to answer that, Jason?
Yeah, crayfish collected in the water's fine.
In the pond?
Yes, crayfish are okay. But we did do the deal with the sales, so there's only 3 species that can be sold in the state.
What,
And yeah, 3 different types of crawdads.
Oh.
Now, as far as from your car fund though, depending on how these next regulations go, water is an issue.
Yes.
And so, moving crayfish in water potentially could not be allowed. But yes, we're allowing people to collect and use crayfish.
All right. You still got some life in you, Doug? Ready for the next one?
Ready,
All right.
we need a roll call.
You haven't voted on this one.
Mr. Chairman, that's all right.
My mistake, Mr. Secretary.
Ready?
Let's have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Bolton,
Yes.
Commissioner Bud,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer.
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
7-0, passes.
All right. Doug, you ready for the next one?
Yes, sir. KR 11530-13, removal of vessels from the waters of the state. This proposed regulation would require the draining of live wells, bilges, and drain plugs to be removed from all vessels prior to transport on a public highway.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
move KAR 115-30-13.
Can I have a
Second it.
second? Now, is there any discussion?
I would like to point out that it says public highway, dirt road, trail, dog track, whatever. It's anything you're driving on, not just highways.
I think public highway is a legal terminology.
It is,
that,
it's defined as any public way.
It doesn't need
It's
to be
not like
blacktop.
state
as we
highway.
always do it.
What were the 3 things that had to be drained? Live well, bilge areas.
Draining of live wells, bilges, and drain plugs need to be removed.
Okay, thanks. That's from all waters.
That's the way this one reads, yes. There is an amendment that will be considered.
Okay, let's talk about the amendment a little bit. The possible amendment is to have this restriction only in A&S waters. If you live in this part of the state, in Region 2, nearly every water is going to have A&S in it anyway.
Well, that's not
Well,
quite
the
true.
bigger
big reservoirs.
Bigger
yeah.
reservoirs.
Mhm, right.
And it's probably the greatest risk of moving water, and I think it's probably easier from a law enforcement standpoint to be able to just have it at all bodies of water, I think. Isn't that sort of what everybody's thinking?
I would generally concur with that.
The people who would feel like they've been infringed upon are those that, for whatever reason, wanted to take their fish home live and swim and put a live well plug in, and with that, we want to prohibit. It's about the only way we can effectively require that water not be moved.
Well, this would allow water to be moved.
The amendment, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anybody who wants to make a motion that we have the amendment?
Need to have a motion and a second for the regulation first, and then a motion and a second for the amendment, if that's the way it's gonna go.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the regulation, but I don't know if we,
Who was the?
didn't we?
Yeah, I did. I moved it.
Okay.
Seconded.
Tom and.
Got that.
But if we don't move the amendment, then it's mute.
Yeah, it just doesn't do anything.
Right.
Does anybody want to move the amendment? Okay, then any more discussion? Let's go ahead and vote on the reg.
All right, Commissioner Bolton,
Yes.
Commissioner Budd,
Yes.
Commissioner Dill,
Yes.
Commissioner Dahl,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Lauber.
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
You got any more, Doug?
I think that's it for me.
Get a master job. I want to thank, we hope it'll take effect January 1. All right. Do we have any other business or anything that needs to be dealt with this evening?
Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Second the motion.
All in favor, stand up. Thank you all for coming this evening.